Hi everyone, I'm Mark Harrison and this is a history of Rome. Last time we heard how the Etruscans came into power in Rome and how they enhanced the city through public works and political reform, and how they extended Roman territory through successful campaigns against their neighbours. But we also heard about the dysfunctional side of the dynasty and how its members often plotted and murdered their way to power. Let's continue. Having now succeeded to the kingship of Rome through murder and corruption, Tarquin the Proud set about further securing his position. He ruthlessly purged the Senate of elements he deemed disloyal, putting to death those he suspected of favouring the old order. Their numbers he never replaced. Of those that survived the purge, any thoughts they may have harboured about having any influence in the new regime could be quickly dismissed, for Tarquin marginalised them, electing to rule alone. He looked then to further strengthen his position through the marriage of his daughter to a Latin prince, Octavius Mamilius of Tusculum, thereby gaining a strong personal ally. Once he felt that his domestic position was unassailable, he turned his attention to the strengthening of the city's power. To do this, he looked to the Latin League. He invited them to not only renew their old treaty with Rome, but suggested that they form a unified military, thereby increasing the influence of both parties in the region. He added that this would offer greater protection for the people of Latium and that there would be an equal division of any spoils of war, but the leadership would of course be Roman. To discuss the matter, he called the Latin leaders to a meeting at the sacred grove of Ferentinum. Intrigued, they came. The mood was generally favourable, but there was one major dissenting voice, that of Turnus Hedonius of Aricia, who warned his fellow Latins not to trust Tarquin. There was no final decision, and the leaders departed. Not wishing to lose an opportunity, Tarquin organised a further meeting, and this time he was prepared for the troublesome Latin. From the start, Tarquin accused Turnus of making plans to assassinate him. The other leaders were sceptical, but agreed to go with Tarquin when he invited them to go with him to Turnus' house. There, Tarquin's accusations seemed justified when a quantity of swords were found. Events now moved swiftly, with the Latins quickly pronouncing Turnus guilty. He was subsequently executed by drowning. But what the leaders had not known was that the incident had been set up and that the swords had been deliberately planted by one of Turnus' own servants who had been bribed by the Roman king. As far as Tarquin was concerned, the end justified the means, for the Latins were now on board and they signed the treaty. And with his new allies in place, Tarquin's first move was to go to war with the Volsci. It was Rome's first martial encounter with the tribe which lay to the south of Latium, but it would not be their last. The war proved successful for the new Roman-Latin allied forces. They defeated the Volsci and captured the town of Suessa Pometia. Tarquin returned home triumphant, and with his part of the plunder he resumed the work begun by his father, the building of the temple to Jupiter Optimus Maximus. Though, through his typical disregard for diplomacy, he drew the ire of Rome's Sabine community by removing many ancient Sabine shrines to clear more land for the construction. Despite Tarquin being able to show both sides the tangible benefits of a Roman-Latin alliance, he suffered a setback to his plans when the town of Gabii suddenly withdrew from the treaty. It was a challenge that the king could not allow to go unanswered, and so he immediately made plans to bring it back into the fold. This time though, rather than his usual resorting to brute force, Tarquin decided on a more subtle approach. He elected to send the youngest of his three sons, Sextus Tarquinius, to the town on the pretext that he had revolted against his father and was looking for help. The authorities in Gabii accepted this and took him in. Sextus quickly gained favour by fighting as part of the town's army against their neighbours and distinguishing himself in battle. Through this show of competence, it was not long before he had risen through the ranks and was entrusted with the command of Gabii's forces. Still though, he continued the pretence. even leading his men against the Romans in some minor engagements. Now, in a position of power and trusted by the city's leaders, Sextus finally felt it was time to act, and so sent a messenger to his father requesting instructions. It is said that after listening to the messenger, Tarquin made no reply. Instead, he simply walked around the garden and, using a stick, lopped off the heads of the tallest poppies that grew there. When the messenger returned and informed his master what had occurred, Sextus interpreted this as an instruction to act against the town's aristocracy. In a bold move, he rallied the people and openly accused their leaders of plotting with his father against the interests of the town. The people, now angered, turned on the aristocrats, and in the confusion, many they stoned to death. Too late did the inhabitants of Gabii realise that Sextus had manipulated and betrayed them when, during the resultant chaos, Tarquin joined his son and through force of arms brought the Gabii to their knees, compelling them back into the alliance. Now, away from war and politics, King Tarquin had other claims to fame. A notable one was his acquisition of the Sibylline books. These were oracular prophecies of the cult of Apollo that had found their way to the Greek colony of Cumae in Magna Graecia in southern Italy. The story goes that when travelling, Tarquin was approached by a sibyl or priestess from Cumae who offered to sell him 9 of these books. Tarquin, though, thinking that the price was too high, refused the offer. The priestess said nothing, but immediately burnt 3 of the books before offering the remainder, but without lowering the price. Once again, Tarquin refused, and once again the priestess responded by burning 3 of the books. The remaining 3 she then offered once more, but still at the original price. Unable now to allow all the books to be destroyed, Tarquin finally agreed to buy, bringing them back to Rome. In the subsequent centuries, the prophecies contained in the Sibylline books became an important tool of the Roman state and were consulted at times when Rome was in dire circumstances. Despite the books, though, and the buildings, the alliances and the military victories, Tarquin's rule was far from popular, and he knew it. He attempted to quieten dissent by embarking upon another military campaign, this time against the southern Rutuli, specifically looking to capture the wealthy town of Ardea. To begin with, the Romans attempted to capture the town by storm, but they failed, and so they settled down to besieging it. Now, sieges, by their nature, suffer from large periods of inaction, and the siege of Ardea was no different. And inactive soldiers, more often than not, become bored soldiers. So it was not long, therefore, before a group of young noblemen turned their attention to drinking and issuing challenges against one another, including finding out who had the most virtuous wife. To this end, they skipped camp and secretly spied on each other's wives. They soon saw that all of them had given themselves over to the more pleasurable activities of life. All that is, except for one, Lucretia, the wife of Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. Whilst the others were seen to be enjoying the high life, Lucretia was refraining from pleasure and simply attending to her domestic duties. All agreed that she was thus the most virtuous of all the wives. Now, this challenge may have seemed rather innocuous at the time, but it was to set in motion a chain of events that would change the direction of Rome forever. One of the young noblemen that had taken part in the challenge was none other than Sextus Tarquinius, the king's son who had helped to deliver him the town of Gabii. Having seen Lucretia for the first time, he became enamoured of her beauty and full of desire to have her. To fulfill that desire, he stole away from the camp one evening and secretly made his way to the house where Lucretia lived. As an honourable Roman wife, Lucretia felt duty-bound to entertain her husband's military colleague, and so bade him enter. But Sextus' idea of entertainment was far different from that of his hostess. He professed his need of her and demanded that she give herself to him. But this virtuous woman would not accommodate his wants. Faced with her refusal, Sextus looked to coerce her by threatening to kill her and one of her male slaves, lay the bodies together and then tell her husband that he had found her committing adultery. Lucretia was trapped. She knew that there was now little she could do and that this scenario would bring great dishonour to her husband. To avoid it, she was forced to succumb to Sextus' lust. Despite the fact that she had been coerced, Lucretia soon found that she was unable to live with the guilt of what had happened. Sometime later, she sent out word to her husband, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, her father, Spurius Lucretius Tricipitinus, and two other noblemen, Publius Valerius and Lucius Junius Brutus, to attend her. To the assembled group, she told of the events between her and the king's son. Then, stating that she was unable to live with the shame anymore, and in spite of the pleas of the others not to do so, using the knife she had brought with her, she took her own life. The now enraged men immediately vowed vengeance against the Tarquins. Brutus set off for Rome, where he gathered the people and told them the tale of the rape of Lucretia. Whipped up to a frenzy of hatred, the people, there and then, voted to banish the king and his family from the city forever. Having easily won over the rank and file, Brutus then called and addressed the Senate, where he laid bare this and other crimes committed by the Tarquins. As the calls for action against the king grew, his wife Tullia, fearing for her own life and to warn her husband, fled the city, heading for the safety of the camp outside Ardea. As soon as he had been informed of the situation, Tarquin made haste to return. At the same time, Brutus set off towards Ardea. Their fortunes were very different. Lauded as a hero, Brutus was able to take control of the army. Tarquin, on the other hand, was denied entry to Rome and was forced to flee into exile. The Senate now acted decisively, choosing to abolish the monarchy and to replace it with a new system of rule where power was shared by two of their number, elected as consuls. These consuls would have the ability to veto each other, and they would be replaced by new men following annual elections. With the people also in support, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus and Lucius Junius Brutus were elected as the first consuls of the newly born Roman Republic. It was 509 BC, and the destiny of the city had been set upon a new course. If you like our work, please help by subscribing, pressing the bell button and commenting. And we'll see you next time on A History of Rome.